Time now for an in-depth look at the market news this afternoon, and for that I'm joined on the line by Dr. Jun-sok, professor of economics at the Catholic University of Korea. Professor Young, good afternoon. Thanks for coming on today.
Happy to be here.
Let's start with Wall Street, where stocks were a little mixed overnight. The S&P and the Dow this time both at new highs. An interesting story was a jump in the price of Biogen shares on reports that Samsung Group wants to acquire the drug maker. What's the story in the global markets?
Okay, well, as you mentioned, the S&P closed at record highs. This was the 70th record high for the year. If you just look at how many record highs were in this year, it ranks second to 1995, which had 77 record highs. So it was a very good year for the U.S. S&P 500. Dow is closed. It's at record levels, but NASDAQ, as you mentioned, declined. The recent changes, the recent record highs, do seem to be due to the coronavirus, the Omicron variant. If you look at who won and who lost, travel-related stocks fell, but consumer stocks, including fast food and large consumer shops like Costco, it rose to new all-time highs. The market may also be thinking that perhaps the interest rate increases may be delayed because of the Omicron variant, but that we'll have to wait and see. For the month of December, S&P rose by 27.6%, Dow by 19.2%, and NASDAQ by 22.3%. And while there's one more trading day left for the almost the entire year, Dow rose by 20.73%, S&P by 29.52%, and NASDAQ by 24.16%. Europe, after rising most of last week, CAC and DAX fell yesterday, and FTSE rose yesterday. For the entire year, almost the entire year, I should say, they also still have one more trading day left. DAX DAX rose by 15.48%, FTSE by 12.92%, CAC by 28.14%. Asian markets for last week, it's been behaving somewhat differently. It's been up and down for the week, but Shanghai and Hang Seng, Hong Kong markets were rising today. Nikkei was falling, and again, for the year, or almost a year, depending on which country, because some countries have one trading day left, some do not. Nikkei rose by 5.63%, so overall they didn't rise by much. And if you look at the year-long charts, they really had sort of a roller coaster ride along a very slowly rising trend. So it was a very up and down year for them. It rose by 5.63%. Shanghai for the year rose by 3.32%. They also had a roller coaster year in the latter part of the year. And Hang Seng, it fell by 16.02%.
Well, here in Korea, it was the last trading day of the year, and we've been seeing a divergence. We continue to see a divergence in the past several sessions in the movement on the KOSPI versus the secondary KOSDAQ, which actually closed a little higher today, while the KOSPI is down. A solid gain for SK Hynix today, not so for shares of LG Chem, which has really taken a beating this year. Tell us about the domestic market.
Okay, well, on the 28th, there was a massive sell-off by Korean individual investors, nearly 3 trillion won over the KOSPI and the KOSDAQ market. About 1.8 trillion won was sold on KOSPI, 1.1 trillion won was sold from KOSDAQ. But those sold-off stocks were highly sought after by institutions and foreigners. Individuals sold off their stocks to avoid paying increased transfer taxes next year. Institutions and foreigners bought these stocks to gain opportunities for dividends. And today, the individuals are buying again, while institutions and foreigners are selling. As for the LG Chemical, that is a very interesting case. Theoretically, the fact that they're selling off the battery division shouldn't make that much of a difference because the LG Chemical is still maintaining stock ownership of the battery subsidiary. But still, there seems to be a lot of psychological factors involved that stockholders believe that the stocks for LG Chemicals will fall once the chemical division becomes a independent subsidiary. For KOSDAQ, individuals are buying, institutions are selling, and the KOSDAQ was up 0.58% today. And for the year, Korean individuals made a big participation in the market. 73 trillion won worth of stocks were bought by individuals. Foreigners, on the other hand, sold off about 25 trillion won of their stocks. So the individuals have been making a lot of influence over the KOSDAQ market, the KOSPI market this year.
Well, now a story from China. The authorities there have put the city of Xi'an on strict lockdown because of a coronavirus outbreak of about 1,000 cases. And Samsung Electronics has a plant in Xi'an that's said to make around 10% of the world's NAND flash memory chips. Samsung said now that this could disrupt its operations there because they don't have enough people at work. Not a good situation for Samsung, or it would seem for the global supply chain. What can you tell us about that, Professor?
Okay, well, this is very important to Samsung's bottom line, but not necessarily for Korea's GDP. The Samsung company is within China's borders, so what production they have and what exports they have count toward the China's GDP and China's exports. What Korea gets out of it is limited to licensing fees, headquarters services, and part of the profit by the Samsung headquarters back in Korea. So I don't expect this to have too much of an effect on Korean GDP and Korean exports, but it may have a very large effect on Samsung's bottom line. But it may also be useful for Korea and Samsung because, well, the halt in Xi'an factory production may raise global memory prices. So it won't be as big a loss, perhaps, as Samsung is fearing. And but to the extent that the production halt in Xi'an for Samsung and other companies may hurt Korea's exports of intermediate goods to those Chinese factories, it may hurt Korea's exports, but the amount that Korea may be hit with is not very clear. The biggest Chinese companies affected is supposed to be BYD and Geely automobiles, which make electric cars. So it is not entirely clear how much intermediate parts Korea exports to the city of Xi'an.
Well, finally, Professor, we're almost out of time, but a real big picture view of the data for November industrial output rising 3.2%, but retail sales down about 2%. What do you make of that?
Okay, well, much of the production increase may be returning to previous trends. The largest increases took place in semiconductors. That's probably due to increased exports. And then the second largest increase took place in automobiles. Right now, the automobile production really depends on whether they can get the parts steadily. And in October, the parts were not really there, so the automobile production fell, and now it may be just returning to normality. Consumption falling, that's more worrisome because, well, the distancing measures were loosened in November, but the fact that the November consumption fell, well, when we had an increase in consumption in September and October, it may, because we had relief payments, it may have drawn the demand from future rather than create new demand, which means that we may be looking at lower consumption growth for November and December.
All right, Professor, we'll have to leave it there for today. We at Arirang News would like to thank you for coming on every week and sharing all of this with us, and we hope you have a happy new year. We'll see you in 2022.
Okay, I hope you and all the watchers have a very happy new year.
We appreciate that. Thank you.